All right, welcome everyone. Today we have a guest speaker, Greg Drobny. I apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly. He's a prior Army veteran, and he was airborne infantry. He was the team chief actually, and then he's the Code Platoon student outreach and recruitment manager. So at this point, I'll hand it off to Greg, and then whenever you want me to go to the next slide, please let me know.
Sure. Thanks, Francisco, and thank you for letting me drop in. Everyone, there's a lot of you probably who I've already spoken to via email or maybe on the phone, in which case a lot of what you hear now is just going to be redundant. I like to jump into these intro programs simply to offer my services as a way of answering questions. Some people come to intro to coding first before they know really anything about Code Platoon. They just see it as a great way to start their journey, which is awesome. That's why we have it. But for those of you who are in that position, you might be wondering, like, well, okay, what do I do now? What's my next steps? That's what I'm here tonight to answer. So I'll just give a couple of quick items and then kind of open it up for questions for whoever has, any questions about Code Platoon, what we do. I'm going to defer any technical questions to Francisco. So anything that's like, hey, how do I write this particular type of code? That's not going to be me. I'm not going to be the person to answer that. But anything regarding the program, how to get into it, what we do, that's what I'm here for. My email, greg@codeplatoon.org. You want to set up a time to talk to me one-on-one, please email me. I'll set up a time one-on-one and we can talk about anything that we discuss here that you want to discuss in private or whatever. So yeah, feel free to contact me at any time. Next slide. For those of you who haven't checked out our website already, Basics Code Platoon is a 15-week immersive full web development stack program in which you'll be learning Python. Yeah, you can read all of that. Here's our upcoming cohorts and the application deadlines. This program that you're going through now is designed to help prepare for the application and get you ready for the deadline. Get ready for the application challenges. We're doing Python in this one, right, Francisco? That's what we're okay. So this one is geared towards Python. For those of you curious, our application challenges for the full stack program can be done in one of two. It can be done in JavaScript or Python. Our DevOps program, which is a new offering for 2023, has to be done in Python. So that's the big difference, is that you can't do the DevOps application in JavaScript, just so you're all aware. Check out those dates. No, that's perfectly fine. And just so everybody's aware, all those dates, all the application deadlines, dates, it's all on our homepage. So codeplatoon.org, they're all listed. You just scroll down a little bit and you'll find all of those dates listed on our website. You can go to the next slide. Most common questions I get are how to pay for Code Platoon. So those unaware, option one of the most common method of paying for Code Platoon is VetTech. If you're not familiar with VetTech, I encourage you to check it out on the VA's website. VetTech was developed by the VA as basically a way to shore up the shortcomings of the GI Bill with regard to schools like ours. When I got out of the military back in 2009, it was very common to hear veterans talk about how they wanted to go to a school like this. They couldn't because the GI Bill simply would not pay for it, or there were so many constraints on using the GI Bill that it was nearly impossible. So VetTech was created. It's a great program. It was a pilot program until this year. We are currently awaiting on it becoming a full VA program. Our director of partnerships, Alicia Body, is actually in Washington, D.C. this week testifying before Congress. So we're actively working on helping make sure this becomes a full-time permanent program with the VA. And that's something that we're very passionate about. VetTech's great. It works very well for schools like Code Platoon, and it doesn't have the restrictions of the GI Bill, which option two, the GI Bill, you can use it, but you have to be in person. You have to attend in person. That's the way the GI Bill functions, because it's a very convoluted way of explanation. I could go into details, but the reality is it's based on state level approval, and you have to be in the state to gain the approval. It's a weird thing. Anyway, you can use it, but you have to be in person. That's the short version. For those who don't have a VA option, and I should add really quick, there is also VR&E, formerly known as Voc Rehab. VR&E is a program designed for disabled vets. You have to have a certain disability rating. You work with a counselor. You can use VR&E to fund Code Platoon. It just requires an individual counselor to be able to do so. If you can get with a counselor and get them to approve it, awesome. We've worked with it before. It's a great way to go through the program. Finally, we have general scholarships for any number of demographics. Everybody can qualify for something. Our scholarships cover anywhere from 80 to 100% of the tuition. Code Platoon is focused on making sure that people get affordable training. So we really work hard to make sure that cost is not a barrier. So if you think, hey, I really want to attend Code Platoon, but I'm worried about the cost, don't. Worry about getting through these coding challenges. Worry about getting accepted, get accepted to the program, do the technical work. We will make it affordable. We will figure out a way to get you here. That's what we've done since Code Platoon's inception. And I don't think anybody's ever paid full price or anywhere even close to it, to be quite honest with you. Code Platoon works really hard to make sure that everybody has an affordable experience. Next slide. SkillBridge. I am the official SkillBridge point of contact for Code Platoon. So if you are thinking of doing SkillBridge or you're on a SkillBridge path in the US military, I'm the person to talk to. As you can see there, the last 180 days of service in the military, you're eligible to take part in a SkillBridge program, unless you're in the Army, and us Army people wanted to call it something different. So it's CSP, Careers Skills Path, or Careers. I don't even know. The Army likes to make things more complicated than they need to be. So it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. It's just called something different in the Army. You do need to get approval from your command. That's the biggest hurdle with SkillBridge, is just getting a command approval. Somebody, your chain of command signing off saying you can attend Code Platoon from X date to Y date. I wish there was a formal process from DoD that showed you how to do this, but the reality is it's different for every branch. So what the Army requires of its personnel is different than what the Air Force requires of its personnel. I have Air Force people who have gone through our program with nothing more than it took them 5 minutes to get approval. And then there are Air Force people or Army people who take months and months and months to get approved. So speak with me if you're.
Hello, Sam. How do I go up to?
Oh, somebody's not on mute or talking in the mic. Anyway, it's all good. If you're already out of the military, this doesn't apply to you. So SkillBridge is already off the table. If you're still in, you want to take part in SkillBridge, email me. We'll discuss it. We'll discuss the details of how to best make that happen. Next slide. I think you're probably going to cover that. So we'll go to the next slide. I don't know that there's anything more. Yeah, this gets more into your territory. So I'll leave that alone and I'll open this up for questions. Does anybody have any questions for me about Code Platoon as a program, how to get in, what it entails, anything? That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I have just a pretty general question. You said that there's the VR&E and then the vet tech program. I'm personally pursuing the vet tech program. I'm not sure if for some reason they don't accept. I don't know if people have never have gotten not accepted to the vet tech program, but as a safety measure, does the VR&E program still pay you pay you for, I guess, housing? Is the benefits relatively the same between vet tech and VR&E?
Generally speaking, yes. So to back up real quick to vet tech, I don't see, we almost never see people getting denied vet tech. As long as you have a day or more left on your GI Bill, you should get approved for vet tech. But like you said, it's contingency plans. I'm all for that. VR&E is a great option. Here's the bottom line with VR&E. It all depends on what your counselor will agree to. It's a good and a bad thing for VRE. The bad thing is that there's a lack of consistency in the VA with VRE, and everybody knows it. There are people who get doctoral programs approved through VRE, and then there's people who can't get a bachelor's degree approved. It's weird because it depends entirely on the individual counselor. But if you can make the case to the counselor that you want to attend Code Platoon, they'll do it. We've had VRE students, and generally speaking, the living stipend is the same. But here again, if you can get a counselor that can figure out a way to get you more, by all means do so, right? I've seen counselors who managed to get, yeah, you got your regular living stipend, but they also got a lot of money for a computer paid for. Cool, if you can do that, but again, there seems to be a kind of a lack of consistency. So it really depends on you working with that individual counselor. For the record, I'm happy to talk with that counselor. If you ever do that, you're in a position to, you have a VRE counselor and you want to talk with them, you can give them my information, and I'm happy to explain everything that, they sometimes have questions and sometimes they don't. So I'm here as that resource for you if you do end up going that route.
I have a question. So I have applied for the program twice, but I was never able to complete the challenges, the assessment. Can I apply again when I'm ready?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Code Platoon is not, we're pretty easygoing when it comes to that. We have people who have taken, a year or more to apply. Sometimes that's not uncommon. You can apply as many times as you want. And to be honest, if you've done the step 1 application, you don't even need to do that again. Step 2 is really the one that matters. Getting through those challenges, getting all of that submitted. We still have your email on file. If you did part 1, we have you on file. Take your time, do it on your pace. But yeah, you can apply as many times as you want. Even if you applied and you were told that, hey, you're not quite there, you can still apply again. And in fact, usually the instructor who evaluates the applications will tell you, here's what you need to work on. And if you work on that, you'll be good to go. So yeah, we encourage people to apply as many times as they want.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have another question for you here.
Yeah.
I know there's like a bunch of different, I guess like coding schools that offer a bunch of different things. I guess like more or less like once you get towards the end of whatever program or path you decide to go down, like here, for example, let's say I apply to the DevOps one. Once it starts getting towards the end, is there like any resources to like potentially help getting a job post the program?
Yes. The short answer is absolutely yes. The longer answer is that career services is something that we take very seriously at Code Platoon. That's a big component of what we do, simply because that's what Code Platoon started out as. We wanted people to launch their career. We didn't, giving them a skill is quintessential to that. But the ultimate end goal and the way we measure our success is you launching your career, you actually starting in this field. So that's how we actually measure success, is people, getting hired, getting a good salary offer, and going down that path. Part of that starts here, right? It starts with building the skill first. Part of it starts in the program. Francisco can tell you about that. We work on everything from resume coaching to interview prep. So we work on the individual aspects. But then at the corporate level, we're fostering relationships with very large companies who routinely hire our graduates. So we have, if you look on our website, we have corporate partners at different levels. Some of them are on standing agreements to hire a certain number of our graduates. Some of them are on handshake level of just saying, hey, we guarantee that we will look at your graduates. And others are just kind of more of a casual thing, like, yeah, absolutely, send us people your way, or they'll come by and ask. Not that long ago, we had Exxon Mobil came through and hired like 3 or 4 of our graduates in one swoop. We hadn't had any relationship with them previously, and they came through and just, hey, we'll take these 4 people. So we're building these relationships, and these companies that I'm mentioning are, some very large companies. JP Morgan and Chase, Motorola Solutions, DRW. These are big companies that we're working with regularly to make sure that we have a relationship and kind of a conduit of a way of, them hiring our graduates. our DevOps, you mentioned our DevOps program, that was actually started partly because a very large company came to us prompting us to do so. This wasn't us just saying, hey, let's start a new curriculum and, just some random thing. There was a lot of backstory that went into that, involving a very, very large company coming to us and saying, hey, we want DevOps trained people. And if you develop a curriculum, we'll hire them. So all of that stems from the top level of fostering these relationships, but then also down to the personal level of, everything that involves job seeking. So yeah, the career services is a big part of what we do. And it's also a forever thing. I should mention that. It's not a one-time thing. So like Francisco here, you graduate, you get a job, a year later, you say, hey, I want to expand. What else can I do? We're still here. We didn't kick you to the curb just because you got a job. We're not like, oh, you graduated a year ago, we don't care. No, we're going to continue interacting and fostering that alumni relationship. So it's a continuous thing for sure.
I have a quick question. Do we know if VedTech is running out of funds for this fiscal year?
So that ties into what I was saying earlier is yes and no. Yes, they have a limited budget because it's a pilot program. Yes, there's a potential for it running out of funds. When that happens, we don't know. And B, second, is it going to become a permanent program before that becomes an issue, or will they do supplemental funding like they did last year? These are unknowns right now. All of our contacts, everything that we're hearing says that it will probably become a permanent full-time program, meaning that, the funding, running out of funding is not going to be an issue. It's going to be like the GI Bill. It's just going to be there. Like magic. It's going to be there. When that happens is a question mark, because this is a congressional act, right? And that's why we have somebody there this week testifying and working with congressional aides, all of these things. So, it never hurts to call your congressman, say, hey, this is important. This is a big deal. We try not to get involved in any kind of political things, but this is kind of a nonpartisan, it's a veteran issue, generally receives bipartisan support. So is the potential for it to run out of money? Yes. Do we anticipate that happening for this next cohort? No. Everything we've heard, it should be there for this upcoming cohort. Could it run out before the fiscal year? Maybe, but it could also become a permanent program before then. So I wish I had a definitive answer for you on this, but anybody who's been in the military knows if Congress is involved, sit and wait. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what we're doing right now is all signs point to it becoming a permanent program. When that happens, we got to wait. So, I wish I had a more definitive answer for you on that, but yeah, the potential is there to run out of money. But back to the point that I was saying earlier and up on the screen now, even if that's the case, scholarships, we're going to make sure that, you can get to Code Platoon at an affordable, rate. We're going to do everything we can to make sure you can get here.
Quick question. Is there a prerequisite for the DevOps program?
The prerequisite is just doing the application challenges. And like I said, it's to be done in Python rather than JavaScript. So what you're learning right now, it is a little bit higher level maybe than the software engineering. So it's probably going to be a little bit more challenging, but this is also a brand new program for 2023. So we're, this is new ground. And when I say it's new ground, I mean, we're, if not the first, one of the first schools to do a DevOps dedicated curriculum. So we will be one of the first schools to do this. But the prerequisites in terms of being accepted are doing the application the same way you would for software engineering, just in Python rather than in JavaScript. So same prerequisites, basically.
Thank you.
Any other
The
questions?
Java full stack program, do they also have some Python in it?
Yes. Yeah. The full stack program is JavaScript and Python. And Francisco, being a graduate, can probably tell you a whole lot more about that than I can. But it is, yeah, it's JavaScript and Python as your primary languages. Francisco, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
Yeah, of course. So first of all, I just want to make sure and try to reinforce everything that Greg just said. I was one of those students who, when I applied, there was a weird gap between what was going on with vet tech and funding. And I remember speaking to Greg about it, and it immediately Code Platoon did everything in their possible power to get me into the program. And I actually went without having to pay anything in my case. And it was great. I was able to get the program, I was able to get the training. And after completing the training, I mean, to this day, I still talk to career services every week. It kind of just turned into a weekly meeting between all the alumni that graduated with me, and we all just get together for 30 minutes, talk. And if somebody has something professional they want to talk about, or they're searching something in their career service path, then they could do so, and we all talk about it. But it's a great place to make connection. It's a great community, and Code Platoon just overall has been fantastic in my experience. As far as the technologies that we'll be using in the full stack program, you're going to be learning Python using with Django for the backend, and then for database we'll use PostgreSQL, and that's just SQL. As far as the language goes, Python is what we mainly use for our server and for developing our actual everything that goes on in the back end of a website. To explain it better is all of the information that you see on a screen, that's on your front end. And that's all being presented to you by JavaScript, React, and HTML and CSS. But that information that you're seeing on your screen is being pulled from the server, which is coming from your Django frameworks. And then here's a real quick breakdown of everything I just said, and it's a graph that's kind of, I guess, confusing mapping, but the HTML and the JavaScript come together, and that's where we learn vanilla JavaScript. That's the beginning of the course. As we move on, you'll learn you'll learn about Django REST frameworks. You'll learn how to create full stack applications, which is Django, which is mainly Python and HTML. And then afterwards, we'll introduce React so that we can make a full stack application with React on the front end, Django in the back end, and PostgreSQL as our database. That's the tech stack for the full stack program. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks a lot.
Of course, no problem.
any other questions?
Hi, real quick, I came here looking at this diagram. Did you guys went and touched on the APIs? Can you touch on that real quick?
Yeah, so third-party APIs, we'll learn how to use external APIs that are published and free for us to use, or if you want to pay for an API yourself, you can do so. If you look on the Code Platoon YouTube channel, there at the end of every course, every group constructs an entire full stack application as a team. They divide themselves into a front end team and a back end team so that they can learn what the workflow is in the real life workforce. And then you guys will also, in this full stack application, not only will you have your regular frameworks as far as React and Django, but you will also be required to use a third-party API to be able to create things. And as far as, in case you guys are wondering what a third-party API is, I can go to the Poke API. So this is a third-party API. I'm sorry for the Pokemon reference, but I'm a big Pokemon nerd, so here we are. And in this specific API, we can put different parameters here. And when we send the submit form, it comes back with all of the information belonging to this specific Pokemon that I asked for. And then this information, I can now use it to either do things in my database, or I can use it to render different things on my front end for the actual viewer to be able to see. And that's what a third-party API is. Does that answer your question, Akeem?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem at all.
Greg, I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
As far as for the DevOps course, is this the first iteration of DevOps that you guys will be teaching, or have you guys had a previous class go through already?
The very first DevOps class will be starting in about a week and a half. So it's starting
Okay.
actually in April will be the first DevOps program that we've had. And again, I've just started seeing others pop up. Like there was, and I don't remember the name of the school, but there was another DevOps program. It was a little bit different than ours. It wasn't quite as immersive or intense. Wasn't as, I think it was like 6 weeks. But really, there's no dedicated DevOps curriculums out there. You know, our full stack program, there are other schools that offer the same thing. We're not trying to tell you that we have some kind of secret special thing that nobody else is teaching. I mean, it's what he just went over is pretty standard. I think that we teach it very well, and we have some really good quality instructors. And we're unique in that we're the only school that's dedicated to the military and veteran community. But there are other full stack schools. There aren't any DevOps programs out there. Like this is a very new thing. So most people, in fact, maybe even all people who do DevOps as a job, as an actual role, were software engineers to begin with, and they kind of acquired that skill set on the job. And I say that because often a follow-up question is, well, you know, okay, well, what's the job placement rate for DevOps versus, you know, full stack? There's no data. We're not going to lie to you and tell you that we have some breakdown of what the job placement rate is, because there is none. You know, nobody's ever graduated a DevOps, you know, a 15-week or a 28-week long DevOps program. There's no such thing. So we're testing the waters. You know, well, I should say we're going more than testing the waters, because there is demand. But this is a very new thing. And yes, the very first cohort will be launching in just about a week and a half.
Oh, nice. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? And I put, just for the record, I put my email in the chat in case anybody missed it. Again, you can, you know, you guys can get back into your important stuff here. And if you want to hit me up for questions later about the program or applying, you know, any of that, that's what I'm here for. So feel free to email me. We can set up a time to talk if you want. But otherwise, if you guys don't have any more questions, anyone? Francisco, you got anything for me? Anything else want to add?
I guess the last thing I want to add is just, you know, just like Greg mentioned, we're not telling you that Code Platoon is the one and only stop. If you guys feel like you find something else that's suitable for you, then so be it. But just know that Code Platoon is here. At least in my experience, while I was going through Code Platoon, I definitely felt like it was specifically structured for military veterans and spouses. And I felt like I was welcomed into the community immediately, and it was easy to just relate to everyone that was there in one way or another.
Yeah, and I think, you know, last year we were finally able to have our Celebrate Code Platoon in-person event, and it really solidified that for me. I came on board right before COVID started, and so we didn't have any of these in-person meetings and events. And now I've worked for Code Platoon I'd worked here almost 3 years, and I'd never even met anybody in person, which was weird. But we finally all met in person, and I saw a lot of the alumni, and I met a lot of the people. A lot of people who graduated 2 or 3 years ago came to this event, and it really solidified the idea that Code Platoon really is a more of a family and kind of a military vibe to it that people come back to. So yeah, you know, if you're looking for a program and you're in the military community, you're not going to find anything like this out there. That's where we are truly unique. You know, you're not going to find a solely dedicated military themed organization out there that does this. And I think it matters a lot, especially on the back end. When you start looking for work and start looking for jobs, it matters quite a bit. So, and Francisco is exactly what he just said. And he's a firsthand experiencer of exactly that.
Yeah, definitely.
But if there's no other questions, I'll leave you guys to this awesome training. So yeah, like I said, feel free to hit me up. My email's in the chat, and we can talk further about this if you want. But otherwise, keep digging into this stuff. You know, it will pay dividends. You'll get every bit as much out of it as you put into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate you coming by and talking with everybody.
Yeah, thanks all for your time, and good luck with the training, and hope to see you on the other side.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Let's pause our recording. All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we're in session 3, and we're going to be going over built-in methods and lists specifically. But before we do that, let's do a quick overview over last lesson. On lesson 2, we learned about functions. Then we created a list of different dictionaries holding each one an employee. And we created this function down here that would check if an employee is wearing his hat or not, or just didn't have a hat at all. After creating this function, we decided that we wanted to run that function for every single one of our employees in our employee list. So we iterated through it and we ran our function. We ran the list of employees at the specific index through our function, and we printed that output. We went over while loops and created a liftoff counter. We went over the reversed and range and what range does whenever you run the range function. We ran over how to manipulate list and the difference between a for in or a for I in range. We also went over enumerate. And lastly, we went over some conditional flow inside of our functions. Perfect. We also dove into some built-in methods of list. We dove into some built-in methods of strings and numbers. And today we're going to get a more in-depth perspective of the list manipulation. Does anyone have any questions over the overview? Awesome. So methods overview. A method is basically a function that is bound to any given data type, string, integer, a list, or a dictionary. Methods tend to always perform actions on or using the value being stored in that data type. The action performed may either mutate the data in place without returning any value, or it cannot mutate the existing value, but return a brand new value, which you would need to store any variable yourself. All right, so we got some built-in methods for strings, such as swap case, title, and an example down here. It says hello, we use swap case, and it quite literally switches the casing of every single letter. So see lowercase h, lowercase e, and it switches it to where all the letters that were lowercase are now uppercase, and vice versa. Title would just turn the first letter of every word into an uppercase, and find returns the index of an individual letter or set of letters within the string. So let's say we wanted to see hello everyone, I hope you are doing great. And let's say I wanted to find out where my exclamation point is located. So I would say my greeting dot find. So it says sub, it can take a star, or it takes a string. There's an optional star. And so I could specify exactly where in the string I wanted to start looking for, but let's just say I pass in the exclamation part here. So I run ls, I could see that I'm on my lessons file, and I want to see lesson 3 compile. So it tells me that at index 42 is where the exclamation point is. And if I wanted to really count it, I could, but I believe it. It's at index 42. So there's our find method. Now let's say that I wanted to see it in title. Now we see that the greeting has been uppercase for every single individual word. And lastly, what if I wanted to see in swap case. Now we see that the swap case is taken into effect and every letter that was lowercase has now turned uppercase. I can more than likely mix them as well. So when I do my greetings.title, it's going to turn every first letter into an uppercase, But then when I run the swap case, it'll turn every first letter into a lowercase and then turn the remainder of the string into an uppercase. And we can see that here. So there's some string. Let's see if we could do. I'm trying to check something real quick. Okay, so this is a way to reverse it, right? So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm telling my greeting to go through each individual character and subtract one. And I'm telling it, it's kind of a built-in function where I'm telling it to go through each individual index by the parameter of -1. So I could do -2. Now I would only get the every other letter starting from the beginning, right? I could do it by 2. Now it would only give me every other letter starting from the beginning. Does anyone have any questions over string manipulation? And actually, let me go a little bit further into string. So let's say I could use, when I establish string, I could either use a set of quotations that are single, right? So I could run type, or I could use a set of quotations that are double. When I run this, you'll see that they're both class strings, right? Python doesn't care. It just knows that that's supposed to be a string. But there's definitely some benefits to doing one or the other. For example, if I wanted to put can't in here, and I try to run, oh, and then let me take off that type. And I try to compile my code, it tells me that there's a syntax error because it can't recognize, as of now, I'm closing my string here and then starting a brand new set of string here that never gets closed. So it tells me there's an improper quotation. So perfect. Now I can do this. I can run doubles inside of a single. But that's not correct at all. All right. So now let's say that I needed to escape it. I can use the backslash and then put the quotation to be able to actually run it. Now we can see can't. All right. Of course, the more easier way of doing this would be to use the double quotation marks and then spell can't correctly. Now, let's say I wanted to quote something. So someone said, I wouldn't use the backslash in this case. This is not a closing of my string. Then use the backslash again. And then do something else. Now, when I run this, I see can't, and I have a space here, which is the reason why it's not formatted correctly. I see can't, which we expected. And now I could see someone, this is not a closing of my string, and then did something else. It's perfectly formatted, and all I need to do was use the backslash to be able to get out of there. Now, something that I could also do is I could run the \n, and the \n will just introduce a new line, right? But when I introduce that new line, we see this indentation here. What do you guys think it comes from?
Of the night space.
Yeah, so I actually have a space on line 7 after the letter N. So now if I back that up and I run it, now the indentation's gone. Right? So now let's say that I wanted to print a specific set of string in a separate format. So let's see. Let's say formatted reading. So let's say I go, hello, my name is Francisco, and I am here to help. Thank you for your time, Cisco. So if I wanted something like this, kind of like an email format, and this is not how I write emails, I promise. When I run this, it's going to tell me that there's a problem because the formatting isn't correct. So now if I just increase the quotation marks to be 3, and then I run it, oh, I have an extra set of quotation marks. Oh, I might want to print my string. Huh. Perfect. Now I'm actually going to be able to see it in exactly the format that I passed it in. I see, hello, my name is Francisco. Thank you for your time, Francisco Avalon. All right.
Why 3 strings? What does it associate to?
So the 3s would allows me to be able to leave spaces and format my string in whatever way I want to. If I take away the 3 and I make it 1 or 2, now we see that this line of string finishes and then registers this as separate code. So when I compile it, I get a syntactical error. All right.
So does 3 strings capture any amount of spaces and lines?
Correct.
Okay.
So 3 strings will capture any amount of spaces, lines, tabs, anything that I want to do to my string here will register correctly when I go to print it into my console. All right, so we see I have one indentation of a line here. So the indent happens. And then I had like 4 or 5 indentations. And we see them here as well. Okay, perfect. So now let's say that I wanted to include a variable inside of this. So now instead of hello, maybe I could say person 2, and I make that, I don't know, Jerry. And now I want to include Jerry in this string. We've used F strings before, and I can still use an F string with this format. Or I may be wrong. We'll see. Yeah. So I can still use an F string with this format. I can put an F in front of the string. And as long as the F is the first thing before the string begins, or the signal for a string to begin, then I could place variables inside of it. Okay, so now I see hello, Jerry, which is the person that I wanted to send this to, and it sends it as the way I wanted to. Okay, great. So now let's say that I wanted to reassign something. So my greeting, let's say that I wanted to change the word of everyone. All right, so I can use I'll do it this way. For I in range, and then let's do len my greeting. And let's just actually cut this down a little bit so that we could see it. Okay. And now let's print the greeting at index I. So we see each individual letter, right? And let's say that I wanted to change one of the letters. Let's say that if I notice that there's a comma, I want to change it to a period, right? So now let's go. If my greeting at index I is equal to a comma, then my greeting at index I is now equal to a period. And then it's going to print index I, right? So now we get a traceback error, and it tells us clearly that the string object does not support item reassignment, meaning I can't do item reassignment in a string. So what I would have to do is I would have to manipulate the string, turn it into a list. And then after turning it into a list, then I could change the values inside of it. So let's say that I wanted, like we said, to turn it into a list of just characters, right? So now it's going to be my reading dot split. When I pass that, it separates it, but it separates it by the spaces. So now what if I wanted just individual characters? How can I do that?
The parentheses.
Okay, I could try the parentheses, right? But if I try the parentheses, that's actually just gonna give me a traceback error because this string needs an actual argument. So I could do a comma, and if I run that comma, it would just give me 2 because the comma was after everyone, right? So there's actually no built-in method that will just turn the string into a list of characters. So in order to, since I can't do that, say again?
For loop?
I can't hear you.
I said maybe use a for loop.
Right, yeah, perfect. So I could use a for loop to turn it into a list, right? Just like we did here. And let's say that instead of appending this, I want to say my greeting list dot append. I'm just going to pass a period, right? And otherwise, I'll just append whatever is at my greeting at index I. And let me bring this down so it's easier to see. All right, so now we got the actual string. I'm iterating through the string. If it's a comma, I'll change it into a period. Otherwise, I'm just going to pass the individual character into the list. So now what I can do is print my greeting list so that I can see it. Nice. So now I have a greeting list that includes the spaces. And now instead of a comma, we see that we have a period. Then we have an empty space, and then it goes on into the greet. Okay. So that's great. But now I want to turn it into an actual string. So let's join everything. And now when I join it, I get hello everyone with a period instead of a comma, and then great. Just
Quick question.
send it.
Yeah, line 22 and 23. So 22, 23. Do that keep the position of the dots or the comma? I'm doing the iteration because my thought was like, okay, if found the comma, then turn into a dot, then that's like the beginning of the letter and append the rest. So my thought is like it's gonna be the first position, and the rest of the word I'm getting started in line 25. Can you touch on that? What happened actually?
Yeah, of course. Let me try to print my greeting list here inside of our for loop so that we could see what it does as it goes through. Okay, this is a little too long, so let's cut this down. Let's say, let's just go with that for now. Okay, this will be easy to visualize. So it goes through the first one, right? It grabs my greeting at index I, and remember, index I is just a number. I'm telling it to grab at 0, right? So it's saying my greeting at index 0, so it grabs H. I'm saying, is H equal to a comma? So no, H isn't equal to a comma, so this line of code never happens. It goes into my else statement, where it then takes my greeting list and appends the letter H, right? So now we see the letter H, and we see it being printed in this print statement. So it goes into the next letter, which will be E. Same thing, it's not a comma, so it appends it. L, not a comma, so it appends it. We see another L, then another O, and then this is where our string changes. So now we see a comma, right? So it goes inside of my for loop. And if this comes out true, hey, this is a comma. So now instead of appending a comma or the original string, it appends the period that I wanted to send up there. And then it continues on with the rest of the word.
Yep, I think the else statement is what I missed. I think with the else now that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Of course. All right. So just remember that we can't reassign the variable to a string, but we can turn it into a list or iterate through the string and then manipulate the list afterwards to get back the string. Just like we do here. And let me print the string as well.
Now, what's the difference between doing it this way and just replace?
So we got the replace function, right? And let's just look it up. Replace in Python. So we could do it this way as well, right? Where we would just use replace instead. So let's say and I actually wonder if it's constructive or destructive. So let's try to print it here. And then what I'm looking for is a comma, and I want to exchange it for a period. Okay. And let's comment out our for loop as well as the join of the list. And it works exactly the same way. So the main difference is if I'm looking for a single character, this is great, right? But now let's say I had a comma here, and a comma here. If I run this program again, it was actually able to find every single index. So that's perfect. Yeah, so this built-in function is one way of doing that. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Awesome. If you do need to manipulate the string for individual indexes, just remember you need to turn it into a list before doing so. If you know exactly the parameter that you're going to be changing, just use the replace function. Awesome. So now let's move on, and we got numbers next. So we got abs, round, we got the pow, and then the pow sign will just multiply by the number of 2. So let's see. So I think we already went over some math operations, so let's not do that. Let's instead go with abs and do -10. If I run this, I'll see that it prints 10 because it's grabbing the absolute value. Let's see the pow. Let's say I want 3 and 3. We should see 9. Or actually, it should be 3 to the power of 3, so it should be 27. There you go. And I wonder if there's a difference between these two. Okay, so it looks like we have the pow function that does exactly the same thing as the double star. But that's a good function to know. And then we also had the round, which we already demonstrated yesterday, but let's do it. Let's say I want a round, and let's say I had 2 point and all of these numbers. So that's my first argument, which is the number I want to round. And then let's say I wanted it to round up to the 3rd decimal point. When I run this, I get 2.235 because 5 makes it round up. So we see 2.35. Awesome. Okay, so now we get into list. We got pen, pop, remove, insert, index, join, and count, and sort. So we already went into these a little. So let's see if we can find other ones. This is going into arrays, so that ain't what we want. Let's go into Python list methods here. Okay, so let's see what we find. So we know clear will completely clear it out. We went over the copy as well. And I've never used this one before. So let's say we want fruits. Oh, it looks like this will actually add 2 lists together. So let's check that out. Let's say first employees. And let's make that Adam, Zainab, and Raphael. And then let's say second employees is equal to Francisco and Nick. So now I can say first employees dot extends and then second employees. And let's print first employees to see if it's constructive or destructive. Okay, so it looks like it's constructive, meaning that it automatically gives the new value to the original list. So now first employees is not only Adam, Zainab, and Raphael, but it also has Francisco and Nick included in the back. All right. Let's see what other list methods we can find here. Pop. Pop is one that I didn't go over, I believe, so let's cover that one. So pop almost does the exact same thing as remove. And actually, instead of deleting this, let's do first employees.pop, and let's pass Zainab in there. And then I could print first employees. So now when I run this, it's going to tell me that there's a problem because it doesn't want a string. It wants Zainab. So it wants to know where is Zainab inside there. So let's say that in this pop, in case I didn't know where Zainab was located, I wanted to do first employees, index, and then pass Zainab. Oh no. So now we got Replit doing its Replit thing. Let's go into lessons. And now we want lesson 3. Perfect. So now we just see Adam and Raphael in there. So we know the first employees dot index is going to return the index location, meaning a number of where it's located. So this returned 1. It passed it into pop and got rid of Zainab. Right. And if I use the delete method, I could also do it that way. But the difference is, let's say I wanted to do best employee. And I made it equal to first employee dot pop. Now, if I wanted to print best employee, it will still hold on to that value, right? So dot pop held on to the value, whereas if I were to use delete or remove to get rid of the value, I wouldn't be able to assign it to a variable. So that's the benefit of dot pop, that whatever it pops, although it gets removed from the list, I can now save it to a variable if in case I need to use it later on.
So literally, it just take the value out of the list. That's what the pop does.
Yes, so dot pop takes the value out of the list by the index, by the index. And then if you want to retain that value, you could assign it to a variable.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Okay.
Real quick, Francisco, so it's not permanent that it'll delete data. It's just temporary versus the delete.
Could you say that question again one more time?
So with delete, it'll permanently delete Zainab, but the pop will keep it if I print that list again without pop. Is that right?
So delete will permanently delete it, and it won't spit back a value in case you want to retain it, right? Where dot pop does. So let me show it. Let's see. Let's say other employee. And let's do first employee dot, let's run remove first, right? And let's say that we want to remove Adam. And if we run that, oh, and I need to print it. And I do print other employee. We see that other employee is none. Right, so although I'm assigning it to a value, other employee never receives any type of input once this goes through. So remove didn't work, so let's try delete. And I want to do it at first employee dot index of Adam. Okay. So it's giving me a syntax error. Built-in mutable sequence. Okay, so this one's giving me a syntax error altogether because I was trying to assign it to a variable, and it already doesn't like that, right? But if I pop something, pop actually returns the value of whatever it is that I'm removing from the list. So I can now assign it to best employee. So let's say that I didn't know what I was removing is Zainab. Let's say instead what I was removing was whatever was at index 3 or 2 in this case, because that's all we have. Or actually, let me just okay. let's say all I know is that I was removing whatever's at index 3, right? Because for whatever reason, he left the company, etc. Now, when I run this, I get Francisco because we know that we extended it. So now we have one, or excuse me, we have index 0, index 1, index 2, and index 3. So now when first employee.pop happens at index 3, it removes Francisco from the list. And we can see that here, that Francisco is no longer in the list. But even though it removed it, it returned that value and it assigned that value to the best employee variable. So when I printed best employee, we could see him down there. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Of course, no problem. All right. Okay, awesome. And that takes care of our list mutations. Let's see what else we can find. We went over insert dot pop. So let's see, and then now we're going to be going into session 4. So that was pretty quick. Would you guys like to see a manipulation of append, pop, or any other type of functions before we take a break? Does anyone have any questions over anything that we covered?
When we take the break, can you leave the slide up that you were just showing?
This one right here. Okay. Yes. All right, everyone. Time is 5:21. Let's come back at oh, sorry, 7:21. Oh, we have a question. Go ahead.
People can go on break. I have a question, so I'm gonna share my screen actually.
Oh, okay, perfect. Let me stop sharing.
I'm struggling with this. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen. Could you say that one more time?
Can you see my screen? Yeah, I'm struggling with this. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. The result is supposed to be all this, but when I do the for loop, this is what is coming out. And we're passing number 5. This is number exercise 3.
Yeah, of course. So we could actually do this one right when we come back for a break because we're about to break into breakout rooms and go through the challenges for the day. Do you mind if we come back and do it together after the break?
Sure.
Hey,
Awesome.
Alice, keep it up and I'll look at it and maybe we can discuss it together.
Yeah, that would be great. Do you no longer need the slice in that case, Tara?
Yeah, I just wanted to read through it. I'm fine. I'm good.
Okay, perfect. So it's 5:23. Let's come back at 5:30. Sorry, 7:30. All right, so that was great, guys. It was really cool seeing you guys trying to debug this all together, and I really liked how everyone had their ideas on how to fix it. It's great. So let's comment out these two functions because you guys were all partially correct. You guys were solving the problem in a different way, right? And that's one of the best things about coding is that there's not one way of doing it. So there's a way that we could do it with a while loop, but it seems like there was a confusion in what num is actually doing. So if I were to print num here, that's all this function is going to do. It's just going to print num. When I turn this, I see the number 5, right? So I'm saying countdown is taking in a parameter of num, which is 5. So now instead of num is actually 5 when I pass it as a parameter. So now let's say that I think you guys were working on a while loop format, it seemed. So let's say I wanted I to be equal to num. All right. So now what does I represent?
5.
Nice. Yeah. So I is now 5. So now I can say while I is greater than, and now comes my greater than statement. So here I see that it's supposed to print out 0, right? So in this greater than statement, I could either make it greater than or greater than equal to something. What do you guys think we should use?
Greater than or equal to
Right.
0. You wanted to do something on 0 too.
Perfect. So I also want it to happen on 0. So I'm going to use greater than or equal. Here I could print my F string. And in my F string, just how you had it, I bring that in, but
You
instead of 5,
Yep, with
yeah, I want to replace that with I, right? Because now I is holding num's value. And now it looks like it's decrementing every time as it goes through the for loop. So what's the next part on line 11?
I equals or minus equal.
Okay, so minus equals.
What
Yeah,
one.
so I want to subtract 1, right? So now it goes through. We see 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. And then, so as it's doing that, we should see 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's see how it works. There are 5 seconds left until liftoff. 4, 3, 2, and 1, and so on, right? But now I need this liftoff portion. So where does that go?
I don't understand. I'm not familiar with these. Wow.
What'd you say, Erica?
Else, when I is smaller than 0.
Okay, so once this isn't true, right? It's supposed to print liftoff. But how do I tell my program that? Do I print it here?
Else?
No, you
Say again, Seki.
you align that print with while.
I align the print.
Yeah, it has to be else.
Okay,
Else print liftoff.
right. So I'm just like she said, we're gonna align it with the with the beginning of the while loop, right? Because once this condition isn't true, then the next line of code will get triggered. If I put it inside of the while loop, then it's going to trigger every time. Right? We see there are 5 liftoff, 4 liftoff, and so on. Now, if I take it out of the while loop and I run it, we see the expected output. Right? So this is great. This is one way of doing it, where we're using the while loop, which I think that was more along the lines of what we were trying to do this time. But now, like we mentioned, we wanted to, in the case of what Keem was trying to accomplish, was using a for loop. So let's try to do that. So let's do a for I in num, or let's do range num. And if I print I wonder what that will give me. So it gives me all the way to 4, but I know that I want to include the number 5. Do you guys remember if range is inclusive or exclusive?
The first is inclusive, the second index is exclusive.
Right, perfect. And if I don't provide a first and second, it's going to automatically assume that this variable will be the stopping point, right? So since that's exclusive, how could I make it include 5? Because right now it's stopping right before 5. So how do I make it stop at 5?
Plus
Is
1.
it? Okay, awesome.
Yeah, perfect. So we run +1. Okay, so now I got half of the problem fixed, right? Now I get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. Since we know the total value of num, I could always say maybe print I minus num, right? And if I do that, it will give me all the negative numbers. But I think we just went over a method that would churn all these negative numbers into positive numbers. Does anyone remember what that function was?
EBS?
Yeah, it's absolute, right? Now we get 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Awesome. And then the next thing would just be printing liftoff. So instead of printing I, what I want to do is I want to grab this information here, put it there. Now we see 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0, right? And then finally, to get our liftoff statement, how do we get that in there?
Same thing out of the loop.
Okay, so in the same line as the loop, and I run it, and it gives me liftoff. Awesome. So this is great, and it works fantastic. But right now I'm currently using the absolute function. And let's say I just wanted to print I, right? Instead, what I would do of running it this way, where I'm at, this is all correct. The only difference is that I could now just use the reversed function. And now when I use the reversed function, it's going to take my original 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and reverse it into 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. And then there's the if statements that you guys were talking about. But we know that we need some sort of looping in here. And this is a little bit of an advanced topic called recursion. So for now, I think we're going to skip it and just leave that out for now until we actually cover it in the class to ensure everyone gets a full grasping and understanding. But these are some of the 3 ways that we could solve this function, right? We could have also used enumerate. We could have used other type of methods to try to get this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 sequence going on. But great job putting together all of your ideas and coming up with most of the answer. Does anyone have any questions about how we conducted or how we came up with the solution for this problem? No questions. All right. Must have been good. Okay, so let's go into the challenges. So for day 3, we just did the space counter. There's quite a bit of challenges, and that just like yesterday, they get harder as we go along. So let's start off with breakout rooms, and I'll pop into breakout rooms to help everyone out and ensure that we're all working together. And then at the end of today, we'll meet back up to try to go over some answers. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Let me pause the recording. All right, let's work through the gravity. So it looks like we have the acceleration, then we have the weight of your ship on planet X as an integer float. So remember, acceleration due to gravity on Earth is equal to 9.8. Due to gravity on 8. Okay, and weight is equal to acceleration due to gravity times mass. Okay. All right, so we got let's try to figure this one out. So we got 9.6, so 9.8 divided by 9.8 is 1, and if we multiply that times 1, then it gives us that. So let's see. So it looks like I want to figure out weight on planet. And I want to make that equal to weight divided by 9.8, because that's my weight on Earth. Okay, so that should be a float variable. And once I have that, then I want to figure out my acceleration. No, so this should actually be dividing acceleration. Okay. So excel on planet. Okay, so after I divide my acceleration on planet, then it looks like I should return my weight times acceleration on planet. And I should probably learn how to spell. And actually, I'm gonna create an answer variable. Move this stuff up here, and then return answer. Okay, let's see what we got here. Oh, I meant to print it. Print answer. Boom. Okay, I did that, but I did not do a very good job at explaining it, so I apologize. Let me break it down real quick. So we got the acceleration that's being passed in, and according to this is telling us that our acceleration on Earth, due to our weight, will always be 9.8, right? So now what I'm trying to figure out is what my weight is on this planet. So what I do is I take in the acceleration and the weight. If I divide my acceleration by 9.8, then it gives me a decimal point that I could relate to my planet, right? So let me print acceleration on planet. So now we see that for the first one, it's 1. So now in my answer, I could just multiply the weight times the acceleration on planet. All right. And in the second instance, we get 1.02 and so on. And now we could multiply that times our weight to get our final answer. So that's when we print the answer and then we return it. And it seems like it's doing the rounding for us, but that's not exactly what we want. So maybe we could return, maybe we could round it. Let's see what it does if we just round it. Okay, perfect. And that is how we do the gravity for astronaut. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Yeah, the requirement is not quite clear because me and Andrew were looking at this, and what online is that saying? How do you figure out it's you're using the accelerator divided by I know it says the acceleration due to gravity equals 9.8. So how do you figure out you're dividing acceleration by 9.8? I think that's what.
Okay, so you're meaning how did I interpret the word problem? So the word problem is definitely a little bit confusing. So let's see. So you're an astronaut standing on a newly discovered planet, which we know is Planet X, right? And you need to calculate how much your ship weighs in order to determine the fuel needed to blast off. So it's telling me that I need to determine how much fuel I need to determine blast off. And it says, write a method that takes in acceleration due to gravity on planet X. So then we got acceleration, right? And our weight I guess instead of weight, we should have used the gravity here. So that we could have understood that this is how much gravity is impacting us. So this is acceleration on gravity on Earth is 9.8, right? Because of the gravity that's going on Earth. So if the acceleration in my planet is any different than the one on Earth, then if I divide it by 9.8, I could determine how much of a difference in gravity there is. I think that was more confusing than reading this word problem. But you guys are definitely correct. This needs some revising as far as describing. Can you do the alphabet one? Yeah, of course. We have time. Yeah, we have time. Let's see the alphabet one. Does anyone have any questions on this one before I move on? And thank you for pointing this out. I'll make sure to rewrite the wording for this to be more descriptive. Okay. Alphabet.
Did you personally come up with all these problems?
No, I did not.
Okay, I was like, dang, that probably took a lot of time.
No, that's the reasoning why there's a couple of things that weren't taught prior to. It's because I'm not the one who created the problems, but I'll make sure that they get revised properly so that they can be used correctly. Okay, let's see. We got alphabet code. So write a method that takes in an uppercase letter of the alphabet as a string and returns the integer corresponding to its place in the alphabet. Okay, awesome. So let's just say that I do alphabet and I make that equal. I could either turn it into a list or I could just do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. I'm going. I want to make sure I didn't misspell anything. I promise I know my ABCs. And let's call this alphabet. Okay, so now let's say I want to find where A is located, right? I know that the alphabet has an index. So let's say return alphabet, dot find. I can tell it what index to find. I'll say char. And because it's an index, I know it starts counting at 0. So I don't want that. So instead, I'm going to add 1. And when I press play, these need to have print statements. So let's put that on there. Oh, hello. Okay, so now we have some print statements. And I get false, false, false. So awesome. Let's try to make this answer equals, let's print the answer. And let's return the answer.
I think it's just because they're not capped, I think.
Oh, that's a very good point. So let's do alphabet dot swap case. And now I run it. And I should probably do some variable reassignment here. Okay. Yeah, so now I got my original alphabet, and let's say alphabet uppercase. So then I use the swap case. I could also use, I think I could use upper for this as well. Let me just try that real quick, which would technically be a better thing to use here since I know it's all lowercase. So no, that didn't work. Apparently that only works for an individual.
Is upper, no, or is it just upper?
I think it's upper. If I do is upper, that returns true or false.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So now when I run this, what just happened? Oh, yeah. So now I got alphabet uppercase. So now I can do alphabet uppercase dot find. It finds the character, I add 1 to the index, assign that to answer, I print the answer and return answer. And
Can
I
you try
got,
the upper now instead of the swap case?
yes, I can. Oh, yeah, so that upper would have been correct. Awesome.
What do you mean by saying like adding 1 to the index?
Yeah, let's try that out. So, A is at what index in the alphabet?
0.
0,
Oh,
right?
so
But
that's
but I know I need 1, so then I need to add 1.
okay.
Yeah, but let's just see it so that you can visualize it a little better. So we got 0 because at index 0 I have A. I got 2 because sorry, I get 1 because at index 1 I have B, and then I get 25 because at index 25 I have Z. All right. So now to fix that issue and start counting out 1, I just do +1.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, of course, no problem. And then I got one last thing that I wanted to cover real quick to help us visualize things. But it is our time. So if you guys feel like you want to hop out and just watch us on YouTube afterwards, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, you want to stick around, you want to see me work through this, that would be awesome as well. Okay. So I'm gonna do this string challenge real quick. I'm gonna fork it. And then I'm gonna use TL draw to try to visualize things a little better for us. So now I have my function that I want to make sure I print. Okay, so the first thing that I want to take into consideration here is how I'm going to fix this. All right, there's a simple way and there's a more I'm in control way. So then let's say I want a list of numbers as string here, and I just have an empty list. And right now I want to go ahead and let's say I just want to print the type of num, right? And let's just return num for now. So when I click this, I see that I get a class integer, right? So a class integer is great, but I wonder, could I get the length of a class integer? Okay, so I have something that tells me that integer doesn't have an actual length. So when I'm working with an integer, the entire space inside of this box is being used by one integer. All right, so now if I turn it into a string, and now I go to get the num string length, so now if I do this, I actually get a length. So it looks like now I have 4 boxes inside here. Right, so now I have 4 boxes and each one of them is supposed to represent a number. So in here, I have 1, and here I have 0, 0, and I have 1. Okay, great. So now I got that, and now I can go and make a for loop. So let's say for I in num string, and actually instead of saying for I in num string, or yes, that works. let's say that I want to say if I is equal to 0, or actually, let's say if I is not equal to 0, then I want list of num as a string to append I. And outside of this for loop, I'm just going to print list of num as string. Okay. So I run this. Nice. So now I have my individual data types. So let's open that one up. So I got one in there, and I got one in here. Now I have my list of numbers, right? But this box right now has two separate elements inside of it. And I don't want them to be separate. I just want them to be together. So now let's say that I want this box to turn into this, where it's only holding one value of 11. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say num as string, and I'm going to say list. I'm going to join list of num string. And now I'm going to print num as string. So now I see a string of 11, but this is still a string data type. But now I know that the last thing I need to do is just turn it into an integer.
Also, we're getting a false because the return is calling a different, maybe parameter or variable. The return statement, or is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So now that I know that num as string is what I want it to be, but just in a string function, I could just turn it into an integer and say num as string. And that's how you fix it, right? But this is more of a visualization of what's going on. So now we see, we go through, we create a for loop to grab the ones, everything that's not equal to 0. We create a list of just integers or anything that's not 0, but it's still a string, right? And then we join it as a string, and then we turn it into an integer, and that's what gets returned.
So what you just did with the return command spawned a question for me. You took num as string and turned it as an integer, which makes it different from what you printed. I thought return compares what's printed. I guess I'm understanding return wrong. What does return do?
So return returns any value after that line, right? So num as string is just
that's 11 in the string, right?
Right. But
And
then
then
when I pass it through integer string, then it's just 11. So when I call the return value, it then calls the integer function, which returns 11, and that's what gets compared here. So when I call this function, it's saying is 11 equal 11.
So return is comparing to what's below it.
Correct.
Not above it. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, does anyone have any questions over the visualization or how we've solved this? Okay, perfect.
Was this recorded?
One more time.